Hello everyone, my name is Eva and welcome to my channel. Here on Eva's Bookshelf, we talk all things TV and book series. On this channel, I like to review different books and TV shows. If I am reviewing a period piece, which is a book or a TV series that takes place in a period other than today, I also like to give a little snippet on the time period in which it took place. Today, I am going to be talking about Regency England. Regency England is the period of English history from the years 1811 to 1820. I'm reviewing this period because in a little bit on my channel, I am going to be having a review of the new Netflix TV series, Bridgerton. Bridgerton is I'm going to need a minute to collect myself to say all this because it is a mouthful. Fantasy Regency romance. It was written by Shonda Rhimes and produced by her company Shondaland. It is based on the book series by author Julia Quinn. As I was watching Bridgerton to review it, it just really occurred to me that some of my younger viewers may watch this show and not really be able to make heads or tails of it. There's going to be a lot of funky stuff going on and a lot of historical context that I don't think some of my younger viewers would really be able to understand. So I thought it would be helpful to do a quick overview of that period of history before I went and I did my review of the Bridgerton series itself. In the spirit of that, today we are going to be going over what is the season that everybody in Bridgerton keeps talking about? Why is the season such a big deal for the female characters on the show? And generally, what dating in Regency England would have looked like. Before we go any further, I want to put in the disclaimer that I am not a historian. I am not affiliated with any historians or museums. All the information in this video is information that I have gathered from the internet and compiled into one video for entertainment purposes. So what is this thing called the season? A lot of the Bridgerton TV series and the plot line of it seems to revolve around all of these grand events and parties being thrown in the name of something called the season. And the season refers to a period of time in the year where it was customary for the nobility and gentry of England to host balls, dinner parties, and other events in London. There was not a whole lot of precise information about what time of year this is, but a rough estimate would lead me to believe that it lasted from December to early June. The one thing we do know is that it worked around the schedules of the royal family and the members of English Parliament. The season began in the 17th century as a way for the royal family and members of Parliament to entertain themselves when they were in London for Parliament sessions, because one of the rules of English Parliament is that all members of Parliament have to be in London when Parliament is in session, and the royal family also has to be in London when Parliament is in session because the king or queen needs to open Parliament. The season hit its peak of popularity in the 19th century when the upper crust of British society was dominated by landed gentry. In this context, landed gentry were higher up people, members of parliament, minor nobility, that had both country estates and townhouses in London. They would often refer to the season as the period of the year where they would leave their country estates to go to their townhouses in London for parliament sessions. The season was particularly a big deal for daughters of the landed gentry and nobility because it was when they were presented to high society as being of marriageable age and could find a husband. Being presented as marriageable would specifically occur at the Queen Charlotte Ball. The Queen Charlotte Ball is a ball where debutantes, or Deb's Delights, which were the daughters of landed gentry and nobility, were presented to the Queen. They would wear white dresses and parade in front of the Queen, which is considered coming out into society. This ball was invented by King George III in 1780 as a birthday celebration for his wife and Queen. It was discontinued in 1958 by Queen Elizabeth II at the request of her husband, Prince Philip, who found the event so boring that he asked her to stop doing it. Oh, my hat's off to you, Philip. Oh, I would be bored too. The perks of dating the Queen, am I right? There actually, over the years, have been several American women who were presented in this fashion at British court, one of the most notable being Kit Kennedy. Kit Kennedy was the younger sister of President John F. Kennedy. She was presented at the Queen Charlotte's Ball when she was 18 and her family went to England, because her father had been, I think, the American ambassador to England at that time. After being properly introduced to society at this ball, young women could go to enjoy the other events of the social season and find themselves a husband. So now we have to break it down. Why was finding a husband such a big deal for women of this period? Finding a husband was such a big deal for well-to-do women of this period because being a woman in England in the 1800s was not a fun experience. At that time, women in England were not legally allowed to own property. Everything they owned was their father's and automatically became their husband's upon marriage. Therefore, not being able to own property meant if you didn't get married, you didn't have a place to live or basically any other material possessions. Economically, women also needed a husband. Under the guise of money being property, women at that time also had to give all their money to their husbands when they got married. Added to that, most women at that time were not very educated. Most were only educated enough to get a job as a writer or a governess. If you did take a job as a writer or a governess, there was a huge stigma attached to you and a lot of shame that you carried with that. This is a great segue into my next point, which is what dating in Regency England was really like. So dating in Regency England was a rather complicated thing. What we would call dating today was called courting in Regency England. Courting was considered a prelude to marriage. It came with all kinds of rituals and pieces of etiquette that had to be followed it was considered a man's duty to court a woman correctly if he liked her. One of the rituals that men had to follow when they wanted to court a woman was called calling. Now, what calling is it was when you would have periods of the day where a young debutante would sit in a room in her house with a female chaperone. Usually it's like mother, grandmother, aunt, and wait for people to come visit her. If a man liked a woman, he would go visit her during those hours that she was available to take callers. And they would chat, of course, because the young woman was chaperoned, nothing inappropriate could happen. And at the end of the visit, he would leave what's called his calling card, which was just kind of like almost a business card with your information on it, or a little message or what have you. Women always wanted men to give them calling cards in person because that was seen as a more personal gesture, and it meant that he really liked you. That is why if you watch the series Bridgerton, it is such a big deal that Daphne had multiple callers. The other complicated thing about dating in Regency era England would have been sex. So at this point in English history, English society was becoming more sexually open. There were famous courtesans, church rules were beginning to be more relaxed about sex, and people were beginning to be more secular. And people were just generally beginning to talk about sex more. Amongst the lower classes and the more working class people, premarital sex was becoming an accepted part of more advanced courting. For high society women in Regency England, however, sex was still very much taboo. High society women were not supposed to have sexual knowledge. They were supposed to be virginal and naive. Any sexual knowledge they did have was greatly concealed. Usually they didn't sleep with anybody until the night they got married, which is why people make such a big deal out of wedding nights. Usually on the wedding night, they would rely on their mother or an older female friend to tell them what to do. And they were usually given pretty vague pieces of advice. So it is absolutely conceivable that someone like Daphne Bridgerton would not have known anything about sex or how you get pregnant, and that a maid would have known that. I think that this all just shows how difficult it was to be a woman in Regency England. I think it shows you how little power women had at that time. It also shows the insane class divides and double standards between women of different classes when it came to dating and love and sex. When we read books about Regency England and we watch shows like Bridgerton, I think we need to remember how strong these women had to be to survive in the period in which they were living. I think we also need to be grateful to them for paving the way for us women today and our independence the way that they did. Well, that is it for me. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Today we went over what the season is, why it was such a big deal for women in Regency England, and what dating in Regency England would have been like. If you like these videos, please do not forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.